Hey everyone, just wanted to do a little winter forecast, my edition. Thought it was that time of year again, so might as well do it. For a lot of you, I assume it's a nice little surprise to see it, so we're going to get into what I think we're going to see this winter. So first we're going to take a look at ENSO, which is one of the main patterns that goes into a winter forecast, and ENSO really revolves around the sea surface temperatures off of the coast of South America. You can see them there. It's actually south of Central America and off the coast of South America, the western coast in specific. So you can see, looking at some of the anomalies here, the blue is going to be colder, the red, warmish colors are going to be warmer, obviously. You can see there's a decent amount of blue there, a little bit of those warmer colors, but not as much, indicating that the temperatures there are cooler this year than normal. So in terms of anomalies, they're going to be cooler. What does that mean? Well, it means that the temperatures are about at a La Nina pattern. La Nina is when those temperatures appear to be a little cooler in that region, although it's not by much. It's fairly weak. So as you can see, I have the model predictions of the ENSO from October 2025 here. They go out many months, and what on the bottom actually corresponds to just your average over a 3-month period. So you can see right there, each one of those is going to be a 3-month period. So like here is September, October, November, and then October, November, December, so on and so forth. But actually, you can see those temperatures start to go up a little bit into what we call ENSO neutral as the winter goes on. So mid-October, you can see over here, this is basically the confidence and the probability of each. As we get into the December, January, February portion, you can see ENSO neutral and La Nina are about 50-50. So that actually is pretty big for our temperatures. It means you're going to have a weak La Nina transitioning more to an ENSO neutral throughout the winter. So here is your weak La Nina pattern, basically. Your general La Nina pattern also corresponds fairly well to a weak La Nina pattern, with some slight differences. You can see the colder air comes in, you have wetter conditions near the Great Lakes, and then you have warmer air towards the southeast and even up into the east coast because of that southeast ridge. And the jet stream's going across right there, but it's very variable as it outlines in this diagram, so it's moving a lot. And it's moving up and down throughout the course of the winter. ENSO neutral, very similar. You have actually a big portion of wet weather. It's a little further south, but that cold air really digs in as well. So when you're looking at a weak La Nina, you also want to take into account ENSO neutral patterns because it's going to be so close to an ENSO neutral pattern, you're going to get a lot of those same conditions in it. So really here is looking what I think is going to be what most of the winter is going to look like. That's what you're looking at right here. So you're going to look at that cold air coming down, and you're going to have fairly wet a little south of our region with warmer air to the south. You have that subtropical jet stream linking with the polar jet stream. That's how we get the big storms around here. So my thoughts, again, to repeat them: weak La Nina to begin winter, transition to ENSO neutral midwinter, and then not much difference in between because the weak La Nina is not very far off from ENSO neutral conditions. All right, so next thing we'll be looking at is albedo. So albedo is a measure of the reflectivity of a surface. It's very big for winter because it's really going to determine how cold can you get. Because a lot of times when we see these big cold fronts and systems come down, you're going to see cold air travel with them. Well, that cold air is formed from the reflection from the snowfall and the ice up north a lot of the times. So here you can see we have a decent amount of ice over the northern hemisphere area. So a lot of the Arctic Ocean, especially towards Siberia, is covered in ice. Although it's not a huge amount, it's actually relatively low for what it's been in previous years. But it is recovering somewhat, so that's a good sign. Siberia is completely covered in snowfall. You can see it all right here. Very, very snow covered. That's a good sign to see. You have cold air getting down into Siberia. North America, not so much snowfall yet, although you do see it up in some portions of Quebec, and that is a good sign. You want to see that snowfall start to build. That way it can get colder as you get into winter, and you can get colder quicker because of that. Next, we'll look at some of the NAO phases. NAO stands for North Atlantic Oscillation. It's basically determining where your highs and lows are going to set up. So you can see during a positive phase of an NAO, you have a low pressure over the region between Greenland and Iceland. And what this is all going to cause is you're going to get high pressure actually off of Portugal and Spain, and then you're going to get a fast zonal jet stream. That's not really great in the La Nina pattern, because what it means is since you have the variability with the jet stream, you're going to get a lot of cold shots, but they're not going to last long. So what you want to see is the negative phase of the NAO. Negative phase of the NAO, you're going to have that variability in the jet stream, so it's going to be wavy, moving up and down a lot, but you're also going to have the jet stream dipping down over the East Coast for long periods of time. That's really what you want to see to get those big storms and those big setups. So the current NAO, looking right now, you can see it's relatively neutral. It has been negative for a large portion of October. It was positive before then. It flips back and forth throughout time frames, obviously. You're going to see that with anything. But as we go further into November, we could see it start to go fairly negative as we move on, with some patterns I'll discuss further along. So here's one of the things that could go into that NAO flip to negative as we go further into November and then December. One of the things I've been looking at on the extended ensemble runs of the Euro, which I believe to be one of the more accurate models for this, is you can see actually this jet stream dip here. Again, La Nina, so there's going to be a lot of variability early on. So you're seeing it dip down here like this, dip down into the East Coast, a lot of troughing. And that's really what you want to see. That's where systems are going to go across. That's going to give you some good snow chances in December, especially early December. Mid-December, late December still remains what to be seen, what's going to happen there. But I think early and mid-December, definitely you're going to get your chances for some snow. So we're also going to look at some of the climate models. So here is the Canadian model for climate. It has a run for November. Now, the U.S. model for climate does not have a run for November, based on the most recent run I checked. Probably because we've already gotten into November, it doesn't run now for the month. But the Canadian one, you can see, this is looking at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies, which I think are much better because they run more of an average than the surface ones do, so you're able to pick out more trends and everything. You can see it's relatively cooler over our area, so that's a good sign. You're going to get cooler weather mainly in November, and I think that's going to be more on the back half more than anything. Here's your precipitation anomalies, relatively dry with that cool weather, and so don't expect to see a huge amount of rainfall. You'll see some systems coming through now and again. One I've actually been looking at is a system around November 10th, but you're not going to see a huge amount of precipitation. Relatively below average in terms of precipitation. So here we're bringing in the CFS, which is the US version of the Canadian climate model. So there's two different versions. They have different algorithms. They run in different ways. Again, we're going to look at those 850s because I like them for averages better. You can see on the Canadian version, it's got that big trough. The jet stream's running south of us. This is going to get your systems in. You're going to get some big snowfalls if you're running like this right here. However, on the CFS, this is an entirely different look. You can see big ridging here, high pressure there, and this is really causing a lot of warmth in our area. I tend to not trust the CFS. It runs a little warm sometimes. I've noticed that bias with it. And it's so variable between runs. Like the run yesterday actually had it extremely cold during this time period. So both of these, honestly, they can vary a lot, but especially the CFS, I say, you don't really want to trust it on a run-to-run basis. Here is your precipitation. So Canadian version, you can see relatively dry in December because you have it being such cold. It's going to be fairly dry. But if you just get one good setup, like I said previously, you're going to get something good with how that cold air looked. CFS, it's a little bit wet, but again, it varies a lot. You can see that here. A lot of discrepancies and everything between regions. And again, it was relatively warm, so if you're going based off of that, it would just be wet in terms of rain. Moving on to January, they actually look fairly similar. You have some decent agreement here between both of them, so this is one you really want to look at. They both have the jet stream sort of dipping down in this sort of way you would kind of see with the La Nina, where it's like going down and then pulling back up a little bit. Canadian, definitely a little bit more with that dipping. CFS, not so much. But in terms of precipitation, they're relatively a little similar. They have that dryness over the Great Lakes region, and then they have it around average in our area. So I think this is definitely one you could look at for January, since there's some decent agreement here. It's something good to look at. They both have at least somewhat troughing going through, and then around average precipitation. And then further, let's look at February. Now we're out to February, so it's less trustable, since there's so much variability, again, between runs and everything. Now we're looking so many months out at this. But again, they both have the troughing again. Actually, the CFS has more of it this time, you can see, but they both have decent troughing, and they both have big ridging in the central U.S. That's something big to monitor, because systems are going to drive right along the jet stream here, come right in. This is a pattern that you would see that would be very good for Clipper systems coming through, I will say that. And then in terms of precipitation, Canadian is relatively around average. CFS is actually well below average, and it's got a lot more around the Great Lakes region. Again, that would just be because of Clippers coming through. You get a lot here. Clippers have skunked us in recent years. They haven't been as common, so you wouldn't see it as much around here. Analogs, so basically what you're doing with analogs is you're looking at past setups that are kind of similar to what we're seeing now. An analog I actually like, for temperature at least, is last year. It was relatively cool, especially in January, around this area last year. So I think it's really good to look at. You can see cooler weather in our region, cooler weather further north, and then warm in the western U.S., and then warm in the south. I like this a lot. I think this is something we could definitely see. But in terms of precipitation, I think you could see something a little different. So final thoughts: below average temperatures about 1 to 2 degrees below average. I'm fairly confident in below average December temperatures, especially with what I saw with that forecast from the extended Euro. I think below average precipitation will be below average, especially during the major cold spells, but not to the degree of last year. Last year was so dry, especially in the fall and the winter, that it will be at least a little bit wetter than last year, and that could make for big changes in snowfall. I think average to slightly above average snowfall. That could vary depending on if we get less precipitation, similar to last year. Even with the cold in place, we didn't get many chances last year because we didn't get much precipitation at all last winter. And then, it really depends on if it sets up properly. We had a lot of chances last year that just fell through because the systems didn't go the way we needed them to go. I think this year we're due for a change, and I would love to see it. But those are my thoughts, and thank you for listening.